What's up, data transformers? This is Bolaji, and welcome to Data Career Transformations, the show where we watch analytics engineers, data analysts, and data scientists transform their career. Today, we're talking to a psychology major turned analytics engineer who specializes in data governance, business intelligence. He's the co-author of the book Fundamentals of Analytics Engineering. Yes, we got a real live author. He's a DBT Community Award recipient, host of SQL Lingua Franca, the podcast, founder of the Analytics Engineering Meetup in Netherlands, and he's a speaker at dozens of conferences and meetups all over the world. But that's what you know about him. Here's what you don't know about this man. He loves his video games. I brought all my consoles. I'm ready to talk video games with him. He and his wife love the 90-Day Fiancé universe. And they have every single show spinoff. Oh my goodness. He started jumping rope. Get this. For fun, 8 months ago, and has since lost 20 kilograms. That's 44 pounds. What? Ridiculous. This is crazy. The parent of 2 dogs, one very handsome 1-year-old son, born and raised in Colombia, and now a Dutch citizen. Por favor, ayúdame, bienvenido. Help me alsjeblieft welkom. Please, help me welcome Juan Manuel Perafan. ¿Qué pasa, Juan?
That's there goes like the best intro I've seen so far.
Damn, son, where'd you find this?
Thank you so much for having me, Bolaji. I'm really excited to be here, share a bit more with you about data careers.
Oh my gosh, this is very, very exciting for me. This is we have a legend on the show today. You literally wrote the book on fundamentals of analytics engineering. So we are going to unpack this. You haven't had that long of a career, but you've packed like 3 lifetimes into your career, Juan. You're a very hardworking man.
It's been a busy time, yeah.
This is really good and exciting. Being able to watch your podcast on YouTube, SQL Lingua Franca, has given me a lot of insight to some of the topics that are very interesting to you. So we will dig into those quite a bit. But before we even get to the meat of the meal, tell me about 90 Day Fiancé. This is not a show that everybody is necessarily watching. How did you even get exposed to the show?
Oh my God, it's the most trashy show you can imagine. But it serves a really fun purpose in my relationship with my wife. So what happens is we don't have a lot of shows that we like in common.
Okay.
But this one, we really like it. And every now and then we just have to pause it and say, okay, they're arguing about this. What is your perspective? Luckily, I haven't had to be in a lot of situations to know how my wife would react to them. It's like, and it goes everything from like, is this worth fighting over? Does this count as cheating? Does this, but part of it is the silly entertainment. Even though I would like to think that we're a lot more functional than the average couple there. We also recognize a lot of the international couple elements and sometimes these communications and everything. So
how interesting.
It's quite fun. It's our couples, preventive therapy / hobby.
Yes. This is so good. So Juan, I'd love if you could just give us very briefly an overview of the concept of the show, and then also let us know your wife's cultural heritage.
Yes. So my wife is American. She's from Phoenix.
Wow.
I was born and raised in Cali, Colombia. And we met here in the Netherlands. We met in a party in Amsterdam.
Okay.
While both of us were already established here. So it's been interesting because we were familiar to living in this country, being in a different culture. They don't really celebrate Halloween here in the Netherlands. So we met in one of the few Halloween parties on that particular year, and the rest is history.
Wow, man! This sounds like a romantic movie, man. I'm really loving this. And so I grew up in Nigeria. I've lived since I was 17 years old in the United States. My wife is African American. She grew up here in the US. And so, yes, it's true that we talk a lot about transformations. Sometimes behaviors, sometimes words need to be translated, not just from language to language, but even the context. You know, things that are done in one culture may mean something else in another culture.
Yeah, just a silly example. In Latin America, and this is very weird for a lot of cultures, making fun of somebody is not necessarily bullying. It can be done with love. And asking somebody to dance does not necessarily mean flirting, which I know those two tend to be very confusing for other cultures.
Wow, wow, wow. This is funny. This is funny. I love this. I think we could actually have a whole show on
Yeah,
just
culture.
translating what these different cultural things mean between couples. So I'm very, very interested in this. But you've got both of you have a beautiful 1-year-old son. Congratulations.
Thank you.
You're both dog owners as well. I'm interested though, as we get into, I love to get into people's origin stories. What caused you to move from your home country of Colombia all the way over to the Netherlands? That's a long trip. And professionally, even, do you think that has had any impact on your career?
Yeah, for sure. Full disclosure, I've never worked in Colombia. So my whole career has been working for Dutch companies, sometimes with international clients. I've done some consultancy. And the reason that I moved was, I think my father was the one that started that. He got a scholarship to study in England. He stayed there. Even though I wanted to go to England after I finished high school, in the end I ended up here in the Netherlands, and I've been since that time here.
Yeah, I've had the opportunity to visit the Netherlands only once before. Had an uncle who was living there for some years. Loved the culture. I loved seeing how many bicycles people rode around versus cars. And it just felt like a very different world to me from growing up in some of these really large metropolitan cities here in the United States. But the other thing that's so unique about that phase of your life, Juan, is that not only did you not study data in college or university, a lot of data professionals did not, you didn't even come from a technical background. Psychology and social psychology? Wow.
Yeah, so believe it or not, my first, let's say, career ambition is I wanted to be a researcher. And I thought psychology was a very interesting field.
Yes.
I never intended to be a counselor or therapist, something like that. I really just like the studying human behavior part and specifically like the experimental part of psychology. But it just happens that, I'm going to tell you how it is. An insane amount of people just from my university, around 500 psychologists graduate every year.
Oh my gosh.
And just plenty of universities, plenty of places, at least here in this market, saturation is really big. I remember somewhere in the middle of my master's, I was checking, I didn't have a European passport back then, so I knew like for companies to hire me, it was an extra barrier of we need to set you up a visa, this.
Yes.
Back then in college, I thought to myself, my CV has to be 20% better than the average Dutch CV because otherwise I have no choice.
Wow.
One day I did the math, how many people graduate, what you need to do, and I thought, oh wow, if I don't do something drastic, I'm going to end up unemployed.
Wow.
And that day I started learning programming. Back then I did Ruby, and that was like some months before Node.js came and completely obliterated Ruby. It used to be the most popular technology when I started. Less than a year later, it was like completely gone.
Wow.
So it's been a big transition. Of course, it didn't happen overnight. My first jobs were more around like understanding consumers, understanding users of phone apps. That's what got me started into data.
Yes.
I did it for a couple of years. Maybe my first 2-3 years were closer to what you would consider marketing. And when I was good enough in SQL, in Python, and in R, and Tableau back then, I completely ditched it and fully embraced the data world.
Wow. 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 I'm interested. I love this concept, Juan, that you talked about of having to be 20% better than your counterparts competing for the same jobs. And you were able to get your foot in the door with some of these marketing types of positions. You started to build your technical skills. Which would you say was your first pure kind of data engineering or data analytics job?
Yes. So I did let's call it a very gradual transition. It went from psychology, doing research, then understanding consumers, then building dashboards. And there was a point in my building dashboards career where I realized, like, I'm going to say how it is. Business intelligence is super fun. I love building dashboards, but the salary ceiling is relatively low.
Okay.
A senior, I guess it's not a secret, you can check this in most web pages. A senior business intelligence expert or a senior analyst earns roughly the same as a junior data engineer here in the Netherlands. And I guess it's similar for most markets. So you reach a point where you have to, do I become a manager? Do I continue becoming the best dashboard builder, even though I'm relatively quickly going to reach the point where my salary is not going to increase too much? Or do I pick up something more technical? And back then, this was before the term analytics engineering. Back then, I noticed I really used to like SQL. But very specifically the making things organized. I thought it was so fascinating how you can hear about a business and try to reflect that business reality inside of a database. Which later I realized is like database design and data modeling, what's really got me in there. But I thought SQL was interesting, everything. And then I got to this weird point. This was 2019, 2020.
Yes.
Where I felt I was a bit more technical than most business intelligence people.
Okay.
As in, like, my Python and my SQL tend to be better than the average professional in these fields. But I actually also applied at my previous company as a data engineer. And they told me, like, yeah, this is not it for you, buddy.
Wow.
But partially, it was a little bit of skills, like, let's be honest. But it was also partially I was not willing to give up the whole analytics workflow, like the collaborating with the users, the bringing insights to people.
Yes.
Even now, I become much better at data infrastructure, but it's still not my calling. I genuinely like that collaboration with business people in some capacity.
Wow.
And actually, a recruiter called Luke, I met him earlier this week, even though we don't work at the same company anymore. He messaged me and said, hey, I have the perfect job for you. It's called analytics engineering. And we're talking, this was in 2020. Everybody was at home locked. I saw him in the streets, like one of the first days that I could go to the streets. I coincidentally met him. He told me, hey, I thought of you because of this role.
Wow. I
had no idea what analytics engineering was. We're talking, for everybody's reference, the first time that somebody used this term was in, I think, late 2019. So maybe like 6 to 8 months after Locally Optimistic coined the term, somebody said like, hey, this is a role for you. They were right. It was really cool. I can tell you more details soon, but part of the beauty was starting a new role before anybody, the market, anybody knew what it was. I think I had to explain what it was so often, even to my own colleagues back then.
Wow.
And trying to educate the market because most people didn't know. It's just like, you guys are just BI, but you're calling it a bit different. Or you guys are just data engineers calling it a bit different. And it's like, no. I believe there is something here. That seeing how being very early in this wave, like being one of the first to ride the wave of analytics engineers has been really amazing because it not only allows you to see how the field forms and how different people react to it, but you're also in a very interesting position to help define it.
Wow.
Which DBT also did. Being honest, I think nobody rode that wave harder and earlier than DBT, and that's why I think analytics engineering has become synonyms with DBT. But it's something that I was also in that position as an individual, and it was really good. Man. So just the recap, it's been a long transition that started from psychology, every time a bit more technical, to mostly SQL stuff.
Yes. Man, I really love this chapter of your story, Juan, and I'm intrigued by how while you were doing your master's in social psychology, you started to sort of read the landscape and realize how much competition there would be for employment. And you pivoted at that point. But at the point where, 2019, 2020, this recruiter, Luke, calls you, it reminds me, Juan, of this saying I heard a long time ago when I was young. Initially, as a young kid, I did reasonably well at school. I had good grades. And I always thought it was what you know that was going to get you where you needed to be. And what you know is important. That's like the technical skills. But then as I started to get into the workforce, I realized, okay, it's not just what you know, it's who you know. And on top of that, it's not just who you know now. This is illustrated in your story, but who knows you? You said Luke reached out to you. Did you send Luke Christmas cards every year? Or like, why is Luke calling you? What was it about Juan that made Luke say, I have this opportunity and I know the right person for it? Why were you on the top of his mind?
I mean, we kind of met in the street, so there was a component of a lucky coincidence.
Mm-hmm.
But the truth is, we knew each other because I'm very active at the meetup community here in this city. So I know for some people, like, meetups is a bit of a cynical, like, oh, this is just promotion here, let's go there. But I think it's, I would dare to say, beautiful. To meetups is one of those events where, like, walls go completely down. Doesn't matter from which company you are, you're there, you're having a chat with a colleague, you're learning. To me, it's, I would dare to say, also frustrating to think that in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam, where I work,
Yes.
there is so much tech talent and there could be so much synergy, but, like, you really have to get out of your way and organize a meetup to feel that people, like, reach beyond their company. So for me,
Okay.
it's very little effort. Organizing a meetup takes me between 3 to 10 hours max. But I feel that not only is nice for career opportunities to some people that attend, but it's also creating this moment that, in my opinion, doesn't happen too much. And then there are the more corporate cynical incentives, which are like, it's really cheap and very relevant marketing. It's a great hiring strategy, but to me, it's a bit bigger. I really like when I was a teenager, a young adult, I used to love organizing big parties at my house.
Really?
And to me, the key
Okay.
was put people there that were, like, very different and see who would
Yes.
become friends, see who would, like, sometimes end up as couples. I still have some couples that made at my parties.
No way.
Yeah. Well, it's of course a different context when you're doing a house party, but I still see that a bit reflected in the organization of meetups. So
Wow.
that's why I guess I know quite a bit of the data community.
Man, this is powerful. This is powerful, Juan. And I didn't even anticipate things going in this direction, but you're illustrating something that's so important. I've heard this saying, this is something else that I heard when I was a young professional, which is to dig your well before you're thirsty. A lot of folks might either be, we've all been in this position before where we're looking for our next job opportunity. And it can be difficult when you are in a position that's maybe a little bit desperate or a little bit needy to now start reaching out to people for the first time. And I say, oh, hey, Juan, how's it going? How's the family? Yeah, so Juan, I need a job. Right? You would feel, if I approached you that way, you would feel like it's very transactional, like I'm just using you. But what if I reached out to you 6 months or a year before I needed anything and we just got to know each other, we became friends, maybe through a meetup, maybe through one of Juan's famous house parties, and then down the road when I need something, I feel like you would only be too happy to help me out.
Yeah, I think this is, I was also not expecting to talk about this one, but probably the two skills that people should learn networking wise. One of them is how to have a chat with somebody and make it extremely clear during the chat that you don't need anything in return.
That's
That you're
good.
gonna leave. Sometimes you're not even gonna add the person on LinkedIn.
That's good.
You don't need an outcome to
Yes.
enjoy a chat with a stranger. That's one
Man,
thing. And
man.
two, which is contradictory to what I just said, is you also have to learn to find ways to collaborate that don't feel like a burden. So
Wow.
approaching a stranger like, hey, give me a job, that's big. But if, for example, if we have a chat and we realize, hey, both of us like gaming, let's play Mario Kart one of these days. Or it can be
Yeah.
a bit smaller, as in, hey, I'm organizing a meetup in some days and you might like it because you're working on this topic. I think asking for a job is quite high in the that burdening stranger scale.
Yes.
But some lower things is like would you like to speak to my meetup? Do you happen to know somebody that would be interested in doing this? And of course, now I have an interesting relationship where, as a consultant, sometimes like you become friends with vendors, like company founders, and then you're already thinking, this client might like you. So you just also have to become good at finding opportunities to synergize. Ideally, that benefit every party, not just the two buried.
Yes, yes. You know, Juan, this is one of the, I'm not sure what the culture is in the Netherlands. Maybe you can paint that picture for me. But I will contrast one thing that's different culturally between Nigerian culture and American culture. There are lots of differences, of course. But in this one difference, I think in Nigerian culture, growing up, there was a lot of emphasis put on relationships, people, community. Not saying those things are not emphasized or important in the US, they are. But I think in the US, particularly around our professional culture, we sometimes have a rhythm where we fill every minute with meetings and with work and with producing things. And sometimes that squeezes out the opportunities for relationship building, finding synergy, like things like creativity and innovation. They need room to breathe. It's difficult to do it on a rigid, you need to be able to connect different ideas. And to do that, you need to be watching 90 Day Fiancé, organizing meetups, taking dogs for walks, throwing Halloween parties, like random things. But then your brain will connect those dots. I'm interested to know maybe even Colombian culture versus the Dutch culture, how those work cultures compare.
Man, it's very different. So, for example, one thing that I've learned a lot from Dutch people, and I guess this is true about most of Northern Europe, is if you approach them, it can be like even saying hi in the street, like, hey, good day, or any type of small talk. I think Americans are really good at this. Like, I don't know, sometimes you're in a shop and somebody comes and like, hey, this is a good product, but I prefer this one. How are you doing? Are you here on holidays? Dutch people freak out when that happens because their initial reaction is, what do you want for me? Are you gonna scan me, sell me something, burden me, whatever it is? So the thing that I've really learned is that you have to be extremely clear about your intentions relatively early on.
I see.
As in, you would go, hey, I'm reaching out to you because I'm looking for volunteer speakers for this meetup. And then you continue. It's okay if you're busy or something, but I thought maybe you would be interesting. And if not, maybe you know somebody.
Okay.
But if I start like, hey, how are you? Do you come here often? Yeah, so that's one thing.
The walls go up.
Direct. Yeah.
Yes.
Indeed. But even the topics that you make small talk on, everything, it's also good to mention, like, my experience traveling to conferences around the world and meetups. I have had like the really cool experience of going to American conferences, to European conferences.
Wow.
Talk at meetups in Hungary, Poland.
Wow.
Spain, Colombia.
Oh my God.
What I notice is most people in tech, maybe if I can rephrase it, to be good at tech or to last long or to not burn out, you really need to have some sort of passion for this, because otherwise the learning is so intense. You need to always be learning new technologies. Tech generally requires some sort of personal investment, which can be programming in your afternoons to go into meetups or something. And the consequence is some people approach it very low key, as in like, I barely care about my job, and sometimes they survive. Sometimes they take the first opportunity to be managers. But when you go to groups of senior data people, you notice a disproportionate amount of them are, I would even dare to say, passionate in some way about what they do. It's kind of like, because of the ongoing demands of most tech jobs, that kind of weeds out a lot of people that are not really that much into it or not willing to do the sacrifice. And the people that have some sort of intrinsic motivation to continue doing it, all of a sudden, like, stay in that profession, and then you go to a conference more directed to seniors, and you see a lot of passion. And that passion is something that I've noticed is quite universal. Wow. Even with the difference amongst cultures, you can go to the DVT meetup anywhere in the world, and there are people excited about DVT.
This is true. I've never thought of that angle before, but I'm also not a master's in social psychology, so we're borrowing your viewpoints and brilliance today. So this is really great. Juan, the fact that you have been able to work as a consultant for many years, I believe now you are actually coaching new professionals to be consultants and you're mentoring existing consultants. This is great because you've been exposed to multiple industries, multiple tech stacks. I would love to maybe understand how DBT first started entering your tech stacks, and then maybe what some of the permutations of tech stacks that you've worked with are. So how did DBT first enter the chat for you?
Sure. Maybe a small clarification before we continue is
Yes.
I actually worked as a consultant for 6, 7 years, something along those lines. And I recently this year started a new job. I'm actually in the other side, I'm training new consultants and training and mentoring existing ones in this field. So it's been a complete shift from being a practitioner to helping
Wow.
the people that are going to be practitioners.
Wow.
And going back to your question about DBT,
Yes.
I think I've been doing SQL and data transformation since 2017, 18.
17.
As in, not like dashboarding a bit earlier and stuff, but like properly SQL stuff. And there was, every company has always done data transformation, apparently since the 1950s, before databases, when they had punch cards. But there was not a great way. There were like stored procedures, lots of manual testing, this, that.
Yes.
First heard about DBT back in the late 2019, probably. But then I saw it. It was like, oh, it sounds interesting, but I don't still fully get it. And then I attended the virtual coalesce, and I thought, oh, okay, this is really interesting. We're talking in my eyes, DBT went from like interesting tool that somebody shared the link with me. Just like it happens all the time. Like they share all sorts of startups and projects with me, some of my friends, and it's like some of them is like, okay, cool. To within maybe a year, it's becoming part of most tech stacks that I've seen out there.
Oh, wow.
It's a bit crazy how DBT took over so often, but so quickly, because at least back then it was like the only alternative for data transformation. So most companies that wanted to do data transformations in a mature way, it was just like a no-brainer. So it was an insane takeover. Nowadays, I do see mostly DBT in most stacks, assuming that the companies have a certain level of data maturity.
That makes sense. Yes.
And yeah, it's honestly super nice. When I first started my career, I thought SQL was a fun language, but like to do real data work, you really needed to do Python, like to do automated testing, to do all sorts of things. But I'm just super happy that they brought quite a lot of those things I was reaching out to Python for directly in SQL.
Yes. Wow, thank you for sharing that. That is interesting. And a lot of data professionals maybe don't work in as many industries as you've been exposed to. But even when we're working in just one industry or a couple of industries, there's a thing that a lot of us struggle with. And I'd love to get your take on it. I've heard you talk about it on SQL Lingua Franca. It's this idea of imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome in data professionals. As you pointed out a few minutes ago, Juan, there's so much technology. There's so many skills to build, hard skills, soft skills, stakeholder management, and on and on. What's been your experience with imposter syndrome in this industry, and how do you think data professionals could handle it?
It comes in stages. It always doesn't matter how long you've been doing. It's always going to be overwhelming how many technologies and how fast things change. Like you can go on a year leave, like for holidays or something, and when you come back, the tech stack is completely different.
Wow.
That part is always going to be overwhelming. At first, it's hard to prove like your value to an organization. Like, yeah, hire me because I can do something for you. But eventually you reach a point where I believe the healthiest thing is to be very conscious. Like these are the things where I bring value to a company.
Okay.
And I'm also fine with the fact that I'm never gonna be the best programmer at this. I'm never. Sometimes you go to these conferences and you meet this like 200x% developers, and you're like, wow, like how is this? Some people just build frameworks and tools from scratch, and some people show you like SQL tricks. And I'm like, how do you figure this out? There has to be a point where you have to like be like, you're not gonna be like hardcore amazing at everything.
Yeah.
Or actually, you don't even have to be like insanely good at one thing to be valuable to a company. You just have your priorities. Sometimes it's like you want to combine it with a family. You want to not work more than so many hours per month.
Yes.
With imposter syndrome at first, I get it. It's overwhelming, way too many things, and you don't have like this thing that fully proves value. I know some people struggle with this their whole life, but my thought is you really need to make mental peace with those two things. I think like this is how I show value, and these are the things that I'm fine if I don't accomplish during my career.
Wow.
For example, I'm not that great at certain aspects, and I'm fine. Like I don't need to. For example, I have very little experience with Airflow, and it used to like haunt me mentally a bit more. But I'm at this point where I'm like, it's okay. If it's okay if orchestration is not my thing, here's all of the other parts of the stack that where I have a lot more experience.
Oof, that's powerful, man. And I appreciate you being vulnerable, Juan, and transparent. Some of us struggle with imposter syndrome, not only professionally, but maybe even in other areas where, what do they say? They say comparison is the thief of joy. Whenever you're comparing yourself to others, eventually you will find yourself lacking in some area. But as a professional though, Juan, especially for those earlier on in their career, they're trying to establish themselves. They might feel like they have to show how much better they are than the competition. In fact, you've talked on SQL Lingua Franca about this idea of being replaceable. Like, as I'm building my career, should I try and build my data products, my models, my pipelines in a way where I'm irreplaceable? Like, there's only one me, and I'm the one, with my finger in the dam, and if I go on vacation or go sick, everything breaks? Or should I build my data models to the point where I'm eventually replaceable? And what does that do for my job security if I'm replaceable?
I think a lot of people see this from the lenses of insecurity. Just to give you an example, like if it was humanly possible for me to write books and blogs with absolutely everything I know about data, I wouldn't care about doing it. Like I don't see it as losing your secrets or this, that. Even if I had my own company. Because I also am aware that most people, they have their own preferences, their own motivation. It's not that people like fully go. The amount of knowledge that you amass in like one career, even if it's like a relatively short one like mine, I've been 10 years, something along those lines. It's people that don't just like read everything to do it. People forge their own careers. There is plenty of knowledge that you can still have in your heads. And I think sharing it's a really good way. I really don't see it as a strategic disadvantage to share too much, to make yourself replaceable. If you make yourself replaceable by a company, but you really know what you're doing, so what? You find the next job and that's it. That's like the worst case scenario, but in reality, maybe like you make yourself replaceable and that frees you up time to work on new interesting things.
Interesting. I like your emphasis, Juan, on how people ultimately, and even organizations, have preferences. I learned as a marketer, for example, that it's almost pointless to try and be the best on a particular category. It's more because features can be duplicated. They can be copied, especially technology features. But if you try and become a customer's favorite or an audience's favorite, for example, 90 Day Fiancé, right? We might be able to objectively say, and Juan and his wife might disagree, that 90 Day Fiancé is not necessarily the best show on TV. Actually, I think
Juan agree. It's a terrible one.
Juan himself will admit that. But 90 Day Fiancé is not trying to be the best show on TV. They're trying to be the favorite show for a certain segment of people. They know their people. And so, as data professionals, we do need the baseline technical skills, is what I'm hearing from you, Juan. But at a certain point, maybe we start to establish this is the type of data professional I am. This is where I'm good. This is the value I bring. If that's what you're looking for, let's talk.
Yeah, for sure. Maybe there is one thing that I wanted to also mention.
Yes.
And that is, you kind of browse it, but I also wanted to make a shout out, and that is last year, actually, me and some former colleagues, we released a book. It's called Fundamentals of Analytics Engineering. It's with PAC.
Yes.
I actually, here in my hands, I do have the only signed copy by all of the co-authors, but the reason I wanted to bring it up is two sides. On the one hand, if you want to check it out, it's a really cool collaboration. We try our best to make a book that was evergreen. So in other words, we wanted a book that was still going to be relevant in 5 years. It's pretty much job oriented. If every chapter is around a certain responsibility that you need to know, instead of like fully focusing on one tool, or like by the time the book gets published, I think the time I started writing it until the time it got published, like 2 major releases of Python came up, or maybe 3, I don't know. So really interesting. Recommended. If you would like to chat about it, let me know. What is the reason why I like to mention it and relevant for this show here is I think the reason why Pact reached out to me for this book is because I was one of those people writing that way of analytics engineering very, very early.
Yes.
The best advice I can give to people is this is sometimes a bit of luck, but be always in the lookout for new technologies, new features, and new even professions, which is a bit of a large one. But you have no idea how much it shapes your career to be one of the early adopters of something big. Like,
wow.
Can you imagine being one of the first people that learned, let's say, Google Cloud in your market, or DBT, or whatever? I actually happen to know a lot of them, the people that wrote the early wave of Tableau in my local market. And the stories that they told me, like, they flew me everywhere in the world because there were no Tableau consultants at the time. Now there are billions. Really cool. Definitely recommend it. Don't be afraid of writing a wave early. It's a bit confusing. You need to educate everybody from your boss, the market, your colleagues. But really cool opportunities happen when you're like co-defining something that it's forming at the moment.
Yes, this is exciting. And I love how you've highlighted this opportunity, Juan. You've been very generous, honestly, because a lot of people will take the fact that they were an early adopter, but almost try and shape it as if there was something unique or special about them, the individual, and that, hey, I'm just a very successful person, which obviously you are, but you are almost showing us the code, but you're like showing us the code behind the matrix. Being an early adopter, in addition to working your day job, so keep up your regular skills, but keeping your eye open for new opportunities, that could be one way in which you become the industry or the marketplace's favorite.
Yeah, for sure. I guess quite often when you say that, you're talking about like technologies, but in my case, it was this really cool opportunity to jump into a completely new job title. Which, by the way, I know maybe even in this same video in the comments, some people are going to say, oh, analytics engineering is just data engineering, or it's just analytics. Just to leave it once and for all, I fully believe in properly scoped jobs.
Yes.
In other words, it costs everybody a lot of, sometimes even money, to have badly scoped jobs. If we call every data job data scientist, people are going to be less happy.
Wow.
They sign up for a job that doesn't fit their interest and personality.
Wow, yes.
And maybe companies are going to have higher attrition. I personally love this whole argument of it. Is analytics engineering a real thing? I think the profile is different enough from the one from analyst and the one from data engineering that it pays off to have a title. And then also, it's something that has always happened. It's not like before 2019, nobody was like shaping transformations and business realities into SQL. Those people were just called DBAs or data engineers, or even
true.
system integration specialist.
Yeah, yeah.
What changes? We bundle them and we just clarified a little bit of the expectations.
Yeah, I like that.
I'm fully up for that, even though I'm not like too big into specific titles.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I like that a lot, Juan. I'm keeping an eye on the time. Juan has to go pick up his son from daycare, so we have to make sure Juan is not late. I'd love to ask just a couple more questions, if I may. Juan, as you've transitioned into this new role now, you were a consultant for several years. Now you're coaching new consultants in this space. For people who are on their data journey, I'd love if you could maybe share some encouragement and some advice. How should they think of, like, what skills should they be looking to collect? What types of side projects should they be thinking about building? How should they be thinking of getting their name out there? Give us some hope. Give us some encouragement.
Oh, that's tricky. I can tell you all, the market is really good for data engineers and analytics engineers at the moment. Honestly, tools come and go. SQL and Bash are probably going to be there, have been there for a long time, and they're probably going to be there when we retire. So that's a pretty safe bet. Maybe focus on the things that are more permanent, like things like stakeholder management, but also like data design, get familiar with how a computer works. There are some things that are timeless. So to wrap it up, if you're in a position where you're maybe not starting a career, but you just started and you're like, where do I go now? This, that.
Yes. Yeah.
I think you can either go for the tools that have been there always forever. It's a very smart investment of your time. Or go for the things that are more global, as in relevant to every office job, / every data job, and go from there.
Yeah.
I've seen it also happening. People spend too much time learning something and then like it completely disappears out of the market and it becomes a little bit more of a liability.
Right.
It's good to be smart about the skills, but with that said, I think it's a really cool career. Would recommend.
Yeah. Yeah, I love this. I love this. Folks, we've been talking to Juan Manuel Perafan of Colombia, now of Netherlands, recent citizen as well. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
You've shared a little different perspective, and I guess we shouldn't have expected anything less coming from social psychologists. But hey, find ways to chat with the stranger where it's clear you don't want an outcome. Find ways to collaborate that don't feel like a burden. Be good at finding opportunities for synergy. And finally, you don't have to be the best at everything. You don't have to be that 200x developer. Man, Juan, this was a good one. I'm going to watch this one again. Thank you very much. When can we expect the next season of SQL Lingua Franca? Are you going to record any more episodes?
I'm currently maybe focusing on my new job. It's an exciting project. I probably need to revamp a lot of stuff. But no matter what, podcast or not, always super happy to meet all of you, also in person. Hope to see all of you listening either at Coalesce. I'll be there in Vegas this year. Or who knows, invite me to your meetups. I really like the idea of traveling for a meetup.
Yes, yeah, folks, definitely hit Juan up on LinkedIn. Find him in the DBT community. You need to get this guy talking to your folks. He's the co-author of Fundamentals of Analytics Engineering, DBT Community Award recipient, host of SQL Lingua Franca, the podcast, and founder of the Analytics Engineering Meetup in the Netherlands. Juan, this was a great pleasure. Thank you.
The pleasure was all mine. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, friends. I hope you enjoyed this one. We'll see you on the next episode. Bye for now. This show is brought to you by DBT. DBT is the industry standard for data transformation. It allows your team to prepare data for analysis in a way that's centralized, modular, and entirely open, all inside your cloud data platform. The outcome? Consistently dependable analytics for your organization. Now, the DBT community was built for and by data pros. Come hang out and transform with 70,000 of the brightest analytics engineers, data analysts, and data scientists in the world. With DBT, you transform your data. With the DBT community, you transform your data career.